And we're live.
And we are live. So, back by popular demand, I had a panel of Jordan Peterson experts, and people were like, those are some of the smartest people I've ever seen on Twitter or ever seen on YouTube. But what do they know about Nietzsche? Well, coincidence of coincidences, these Jordan Peterson experts also happen to be Nietzsche experts. Who could have possibly have guessed that? And they know pretty much, I mean, I don't know if they know everything there is to know about Nietzsche, but pretty darn close. So today we are going to discuss some of the finer points of Nietzsche philosophy, and hide your kids. It's going to be intense. Now, John, did you want to start us off with the topic that you suggested?
Sure. I think I don't know, specifically since most of us are Christians or theists, then we should definitely kind of dive into Nietzsche's criticism of Christianity, which I think is probably one of the best criticisms out there.
Well, one of the things that happened when I had a back and forth with Godless Cranium on a video I posted, and now there's a famous thing that Jordan Peterson talks about, a famous quote from Nietzsche, God is dead. And God is dead was not Nietzsche being optimistic. That wasn't like God is dead, celebrate, everybody become an atheist. He prophesied that was going to lead to nihilism. Now, Godless Cranium said Nietzsche was no fan of Christianity, which is true. So now, go ahead.
I think what's fascinating is how much of a fan Nietzsche is of Judaism, surprisingly enough. And he commented on how, let's see, here's a quote from Human All Too Human. I know how much one must excuse in the overall accounting of a people, referring to the Jews, which, not without guilt on all our parts, has had the most sorrowful history of all peoples, and to whom we owe the noblest human being, in parentheses Christ, the purest philosopher, Spinoza, and the mightiest book and the most effective moral code in the world. So there, I don't know, in reading Nietzsche, you can see a lot of connections that he has with the ideas behind traditional Judaism, less so with the more, I guess, book-based versions of it, but very much in regards to the Old Testament as being something noble and very useful in being the foundation for a society. But yeah, with Christianity, let's see, what would be his main...
his most famous criticism of Christianity is he was in favor of Greek and Roman virtue, what he called Greek and Roman virtue. And it was kind of like the strong is virtuous. Julius Caesar is strong and also virtuous. And his most famous critique of Christianity has to do with slave morality, and that it's the slaves of society got together and said it's good to be weak. It's good to be, taking stuff directly from Jesus Christ and saying that this is a negative. Stephanie, you want to comment? Is she there? Did she leave?
Yeah, Stephanie? You're muted. There she is.
I'm here. I was muted.
So you didn't start being an expert before your time?
No, that's hardly. I think that you're more expert than I am, so I just want to let you keep talking.
Okay, well, tell us about. Okay, so here's the question, Stephanie, and then we'll keep talking. Is that a misreading of Christianity? Obviously, you and I would say yes.
Yes, absolutely.
But John, that's correct Nietzsche interpretation, right? You're more. It's been a long time since I've actually read Nietzsche directly.
Okay, Nietzsche's criticism is primarily with Christianity and less so with Christ. Right. So kind of similar to how Dostoevsky and Kierkegaard have large criticisms against the church. Nietzsche also has a lot of criticisms against how Christianity is put into practice. I don't know, have either of you guys seen the Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson discussion on Dave Rubin that recently came out?
No, I started it. I haven't got to it yet.
I started it too, but I haven't finished it.
Ben Shapiro points out how Jordan Peterson kind of diverges from the traditional conception of Christianity, where Christ is the figure by which you can, like, all sins are forgiven, and you, like, he washes you clean, so that
Right.
he kind of takes all of the burden off of you. That's whereas Peterson is reading Christianity as Christ is the central figure for emulating, in which you must take on as much burden as you can carry, just like Christ did. And so there's kind of that dichotomy, because there's definitely that version of that reading of Christianity can certainly be a logical one, that Peterson's reading of Christianity. Whereas
Well, in that reading, Christ is almost like the Superman of the Nietzschean Superman. I've heard a lot of people connect those two. And maybe even Nietzsche himself, because he was actually pro-Jesus. Yeah. And a lot of his criticism was what was done with his teachings. And it was more, atheists would actually like it because it was really anti the Apostle Paul, a lot of it.
And anti-Plato a lot, which we mentioned a little bit last time, which I feel bad because I'm not as much of a scholar on Plato at all. All I've read is the Republic, so I'm not sure exactly where the two diverge, other than their belief in strict rationality, maybe, and metaphysics as well.
Right. So the question I want to ask Stephanie, the slave morality, how would you interpret that? Obviously, you don't think Christianity is a slave morality.
No, I like the distinction between burden off and burden on, and I do see the relationship to lots of different Bible passages to make a case for either of those. So taking the burden off you, Christ basically says, "Take my yoke," if you remember that line, and putting the burden on you. Basically, in one of the epistles, it says we should persevere, and we're going to struggle, and we're going to have a hard time. And Christ even said, "In this world, you will have trouble." So he's already ensuring that we're going to have a burden. So you can actually, it's an interesting little dichotomy, but it just speaks to telling the truth. The world is going to be full of challenges, and we've got to man up. But if we have a hard time manning up and dealing with the challenges, we always have Christ to lean back on. So I'd reconcile in that way.
Actually, both Jordan Peterson's reading is actually correct. I mean, Paul does say, "Imitate me as I imitate Christ," and we're supposed to try and live as Jesus lived. It's just that Jordan Peterson avoids the standard, Jesus, I'm covered in the blood of the cross, Jesus, take my sins, and that, because he doesn't usually interpret Jesus in a religious context. He doesn't go to a church. He doesn't interact with a church group. That's how I see that, John. What do you say?
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. Peterson is, like, we had raised that question on Twitter on whether or not Peterson was a Christian, and it's kind of a hard question to answer, because, like, are you going off of just his similarities to Christianity, his followings of the works of Christianity, or is it like how other people would consider him a Christian? And so, I don't know, my response, and I don't know if it's a good one, but it was on the question on Twitter, was when there's kind of a certain way in which most Christians talk and look at the world. Like, they have the perspective of a Christian that is central for them, and that's how they interact with the world primarily. And in that way, you can kind of, like, tell when you're talking with a Christian, when they're talking about these types of things, or talking with somebody else. And Peterson doesn't speak in that way very often.
At all. That's why he's so useful. That's why I've latched onto him so much. But keep going.
There's certain instances where he does talk like that, like in his debate with Matt Dillahunty, he kind of brought out the more traditional Christian apologist arguments against him. But when he's discussing things other than that, he's very much coming at things from a psychological lens. And I think that's why I said in the Twitter conversation that I think Peterson is a psychologist first, maybe a scientist second, and then maybe third or fourth, he's a Christian. Like, regarding his frames for understanding
I actually remember this conversation. Stephanie, do you have something to say?
I'd agree with that, actually. And I think there's a couple points I think we can expand on tonight that could be pretty interesting. And one of them is that you brought up, and I'll say with Jordan Peterson, is I've been trying to figure out if he's a Christian for a long time. And I've looked at a lot of different things about him. And one of them is he said that he's going to investigate if Jesus is divine. So he actually said he hasn't figured that out yet. And it's going to take him a few years to figure that out. So but he said he likes to live as if God exists. And he certainly thinks that the Bible has a lot of messages. It's almost like an onion, I think he sort of put it, as if it's an iceberg or an onion, because there's all kinds of hidden underlying messages. There's an overall narrative, and then, there's a meta-narrative, and then there are a number of different smaller narratives and smaller messages and symbolic meanings. And so he said a lot of that kind of stuff. So I think he'll keep digging into the Bible and trying to figure out his answer. What's interesting is if we were to do a spectrum of Christianity, I would put him on the liberal side of the spectrum, meaning that I think he could consider himself somewhat of a Christian. And I think he's like those Christians who are ultra liberal, who basically aren't even sure if Christ was crucified and resurrected. So there are actually a group like Marianne Ono. Remember her? So
yes, I've used her in my videos as an example of that, an atheist Christian. I wanted to interview her because I thought her take was so interesting.
Yeah, and then if you look at Peterson's he's also, the interesting thing is he's far to the left in what I would say Christianity, because I'd say he leans to the very liberal end, but then he's pretty far right or farther right in the conservative view politically. So he's interesting that way. He speaks for the conservative. He speaks for men's rights more than he would for women's rights. He's against feminism. He doesn't like the social justice warriors. He points to the benefits of conscientiousness and the correlates of that to republicanism. So he does a lot of things that are very pro-Republican, including aligning himself with Sam Harris and aligning himself with Stefan Molyneux. So they tend to also lean to the right.
Yeah, wow, there's a lot you just said. John, you want to comment or should I?
No, you can go ahead. Okay, I want to bring up one thing.
Go for it.
Peterson said before how when people ask him whether he believes in God, it is kind of just a concise fitting together everything that he talks about. What he thinks, now how he uses the word believe is in regards to how you act out. Like your metaphysical beliefs are predicated upon how you act within the world. And so for him, to act as if God exists is essentially the same as saying, I believe in a God exists. Except it's not tied to just the, I guess, statement of a proposition. Because like he acts as if, that's very much, he's bringing the word belief outside of the, I guess, rationalism and into the physical action. Kind of like in the book of James.
He's also he's also somewhat similar. She mentioned Marianne Ono, and I brought her up in a video where I said you can even be a secular Christian. You can adopt the worldview of Christianity, and she does almost exactly what Peterson talks about. She lives as if she tries to follow the teachings of Jesus Christ and live them out. But she doesn't believe that Jesus is God and doesn't even believe that there is a God. She just thinks that those are really good moral injunctions and, tries to practice them on a daily basis. That's why I wanted to interview her, because I thought that was a really interesting take for atheists in particular. What was the thing that Stephanie just... Go ahead.
Well, there's something else that we all talked about a little bit earlier that I think we could also expand on besides Jordan Peterson, because I think he's extremely fascinating. But the whole idea with Nietzsche, if we were to return to Nietzsche for a moment, you both pointed out the distinction between Nietzsche's beliefs, and this actually is similar to a lot of atheists. I think a lot of atheists think Jesus is just fine. They actually like the historical Jesus, and they like the fact that he was working with the poor, and he was working in the pits instead of the pedestals, and he helped the tax collector, and he helped the prostitute, and he did all this kind of stuff. I think a lot of the atheists that I've spoken with, including today when I spoke to Skylar Fiction, he likes Jesus. And atheist girl said she likes Jesus. And a lot of people say they like Jesus. They don't like the way that some people have interpreted Christianity. That's the big problem. And they don't like the treatment they've received from some of those people. And maybe that's what happened with Nietzsche.
Well, it's partially what happened. Nietzsche's father was a, what was he, John? He was like a...
Yeah, he was a preacher.
He was Prussian, a fundamentalist Lutheran, right?
Uh-huh. And he died fairly early, I think like in his 60s or something like that.
Right. I'm pretty sure it would have been a strict Lutheran household. So, there was a lot of knee-jerk anti-clericalism, which anti-clericalism we can all kind of agree with, that turns into anti-religion, which we also kind of agree with, but then turns into anti-Christianity. And that's where we part ways with, a lot of the atheists, their criticisms of religion, I agree with, a lot of the stuff that they criticize. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so, there's a problem when some people, I even had someone show up in my direct messages a couple days ago who was calling me ignorant because I refused to take her interpretation of Genesis, and her interpretation of 6 days is 24 hours. And I have my interpretation. I'm okay with hers. I don't call people ignorant if they don't like my interpretation.
And this was a Christian who was bashing you?
Yeah, I think it's a she. I'm pretty sure it's a she. And she was bashing me on my YouTube channel. And then she found my Twitter account and she followed me, and I follow almost everybody back. So I followed her back, and she started bashing me in direct messages. And I'm like, why are you doing this? Go away. And finally I told her, I said, okay, kindly move on. And she goes, okay, I'll stop bothering you. And she left.
Yeah, there's definitely like, I'm sure Skylar Fiction too, probably. What was he, a Jehovah's Witness or something? I'm sure he has horror stories about. Oh, was he really?
Yeah, he was. I found that out today. He was raised a Catholic, and he actually, when he was in his high school years, he went to a non-denominational Christian church that sounds kind of like my Baptist church, where it was very a lot of Christian rock music and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's like the church I went to when I first moved out here. California, Malibu Vineyard. Go ahead, John.
I guess a question I have is, why is it that Nietzsche is against slave morality, but is still a large proponent of Christ as an Übermensch figure, especially since, I don't know, just from I guess a face value reading, Christ is a proponent for slave morality as well.
Yeah, the underdog morality thing came directly from Jesus. It wasn't Paul's. Go ahead, keep asking, and then I'll give Stephanie a chance to answer. But no, the underdog morality thing comes directly from Jesus. That which you have done to the least of my children, you've done to me. And that reading of the Bible is right, sort of. That's what the Bible preaches, is that the slave is the person who is dejected and thrown out and outcast of society is ultimately one of the people who God has favored. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. That type of thing. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I cut you off. Keep going.
I agree with that. And he also said, I like the meek shall inherit the earth. I think that's a phrase that's been used throughout history to according to some people, to put down the masses. So they say, okay, your position right now, don't worry about trying to make more money and being a prosperity sort of Christian. Basically, just focus on the next world. And so don't invest too much and that kind of thing. And I think that's a misinterpretation, because I do think that there's a combination of valuing both being meek, humble, and caring and giving, and also working hard. So I think the working hard part was sort of valued in some ways through the centuries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a responsibility given towards those that have much to care for those that are below them in the hierarchy. So like the masters have to treat their servants well because they are, there's an added amount of responsibility towards them in that new position.
You're right.
Yeah,
for you as much. Yeah, I know you're going to say.
To whom much is given, much is required.
Yeah.
Exactly. Directly from Spider-Man, kids. Watch the Spider-Man movies.
That's where I get all my moral teachings. No.
No, that's good. And also, just he said some of the last will be first, and the first will be last. So
yeah. So
I'm sorry, the last will be first, and some of the first will be last. So
right. So Nietzsche was not wrong per se in analyzing Christianity as favoring the dejected and the weak, but his analysis of why it happened. As a Christian, we would go, well, God actually favors those people, and he's watching how you treat those people. That's what he meant. That's that what you've done unto the least of my children. But Nietzsche would say that was like, the weak people got together and like wrote that down so they could have a better, so people would start treating them better. And it's all I'm saying is Nietzsche wasn't necessarily misinterpreting Christianity. He's just kind of ethically a little bit warped. Because his Nietzschean ethics, is a little bit psycho. That's why it came up in Nazism, because they tie him into Nazism, even though he's not an anti-Semite, because he's a little bit of a worship of the strong. It's a big thing of Darwin. It's the Ubermensch is. The big powerful God. Julius Caesar was a tyrant, and there's a little bit of a worship of that figure. Go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I actually wanted to bring that up. I think that's probably why a lot of the reasons why Nietzsche was such a fan of Christ, because Nietzsche's idea of the Ubermensch is the person that can overcome the morality of the time period and rise above it to kind of create his own new morality. And I think he sees that within Christ, where being raised within Judaism, there are the certain rules about, I suppose the main rule that Jesus broke was on blasphemy for declaring himself as God. And right. So by deifying himself, that is a breach in the morality of the time, and so that was Christ overcoming that and kind of, and I think that's Nietzsche's primary criticism of objective morality. So any morality that you have at a certain period in time is going to necessarily be, I guess, overcome by the change in environment. Or the change in circumstances, where what used to be a virtue will have to become a vice, or vice versa, where, say, if people are entirely too meek to be able to handle dealing with their captors or something like that, then that virtue of meekness is something that will need to be rejected in order to sustain the survival of the population. And Nietzsche's other favorite figure in history is Napoleon, who is kind of similar to that, being raised in French culture, which is very much I guess slave morality or the lesser men, and then Napoleon kind of born without any sense of connection to the morality of the people around him, became a ruler and a tyrant over them, and was able to conquer a great portion of the world, or a large amount of land for sure. Yeah. So the rejection of morality as the herd instinct for the time period is a big part of Nietzsche.
Steph, did you want to comment? Because I'll say something if you don't.
No, feel free.
Okay, so one of the things that Nietzsche, there's a couple of things here, and this starts to get really complicated, but one of the things that Nietzsche was doing was basically arguing that against morality, but then trying to build his own transvaluation of values. One of his analysis of Christ is he doesn't think Jesus is God. So he's analyzing him from, he's an overcomer. He's a type of Superman. He's a type of person who threw out the moral codes of the day, because he doesn't see that as he's a fulfillment of the scriptures and God. And that's why he was saying the things he said. he sees it as like he was a kind of a kick-ass guy like Napoleon, you know, and that's why he could throw out the ancient Judaic laws and say, you know, I'm the fulfillment of the scriptures and things like that. But one of the Superman was him trying to, this is really hard. This gets really complicated, but like it was him trying to, once you throw out values, what's the point of life? And he was trying to create not a cosmology, but some sort of a thing that a life affirming purpose once you throw out values. I don't know if that just made sense. Did that make sense, John? You can say that.
Yeah, I find it weird because Nietzsche seems to be very much against nihilism, but he still rejects objective morality.
Right. He would say that he analyzes that clearly. That's why he does it, that he's trying to be honest. He wouldn't say, I'm ethically challenged. That's why I'm against him. That's why I think that the weak shouldn't inherit the earth, because I actually am really kind of don't have good ethics. You know, that's why I think Christianity protecting the poor, when a normal human being goes, hey, that's really good and positive, he goes, no, it's terrible, because he's ethically challenged. But he doesn't want to. He's trying to build a whole new ethical system. That's the goal he made for himself, beyond good and evil, the transvaluation of values. He's saying, I'm going to honestly assess the fact that morality there's no such thing as objective morality, but I'm going to try and be life affirming at the same time. So then he has this whole system he tries to create. Go ahead.
Well, I think one of the I guess metaphysical views that you can put on to Nietzsche is the belief that humans don't have free will. And I think it logically follows that if we don't have free will, then there's no such thing that we could call morality, because morality is about making decisions on like what to do, like better and worse options for how you should act. And if you don't have the capacity to choose between those options, then it's not you being moral. It's just you acting out whatever drives or mechanisms are behind you.
I think that speaking of free will and the idea of determinism and the idea that whether or not we have free will, I think that we're biologically predisposed to do certain actions, and we're predisposed to act in ways that are routine. For example, you don't think about walking when you walk across the house, or you don't think about whether or not you're going to move your arm as you're walking across the house, generally, unless something's going on with your arm. But so there's certain actions that you just do that are routine, but the complex decisions that you make, like, for example, should you follow God or not? I think that's where we have complete free will, and that goes beyond any sort of biological predispositions that we're capable of doing, because we're all predisposed to follow God. According to the Bible, we all have a moral compass, and we all essentially know that there is a God, according to Romans 1:20. So free will, as far as choosing God, does exist, but I would say some lower level decisions, and even to some extent, we're biologically predisposed to certain characteristics such as empathy and conscientiousness, intelligence. There's certain things that we inherit that will affect our decisions, but they're not going to affect some of the higher level decisions that we make that are innate within us, and we have to actually choose not to follow God.
Yeah, I see it as very much tied to consciousness, insofar as we're aware and able to make, imagine certain futures. We can kind of like consider those futures and then try to aim towards those futures. And maybe the mechanism behind evaluating those potential futures is, I don't know. It seems it seems strange to consider. Never mind. I don't want to get down that road because it's kind of an off topic. But welcome, Blanco, or I don't know what you want to be called.
What's up?
What's up?
How's it going?
Hey there, Blanco.
Not bad.
Have you heard anything thus far? Did you want to comment?
Not at this point.
Okay.
How are you?
Other than that, Nietzsche is fucking awesome.
Well, you know what I like about him is I do like that he had the prescience to really predict exactly what was going to happen in the last century as far as Marxism and the whole drive to the slaughter or starvation of 100 million people under Pol Pot and under Stalin and those different communist leaders in China. So
and he reminds me.
Nietzsche predicted that.
He reminds me of myself when I was younger.
Well, I hope not, because he ended up in a pretty bad state, didn't he?
Yeah.
He went insane. We don't want you to go that far. I think he had cognitive dissonance, and it finally got the best of him.
No,
because he was trying to reconcile his non-belief in God with his statement that you need God.
Yeah, it was that or the syphilis.
True.
That's true.
I think what I like most about Nietzsche is his. It's funny because it's kind of a contradiction to his terms in that there is no such thing as good and evil, but he very much recognizes how evil the feeling of resentment is within people, or the like what Peterson would call the Cain spirit of hating those that are admirable and wanting to tear them down. I don't know if Nietzsche would consider it evil exactly, because that kind of goes against his main theology. But
I'd love to build on that. I have a while ago, it's probably even maybe 10 years ago, I published a study, and we were trying to figure out how could we explain there's different ways to put this, but one of them is the tall poppy syndrome, where if there's someone who's actually standing up in society or making a name for himself or herself, we want to tear them down. Like a tall poppy in the field, people go around with a big knife and shred it down. And so in a lot of countries, they actually have something they call tall poppy syndrome. And where did that come from? And then where did that, and I'm forgetting the German term for it, but Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude. So that whole idea where you feel really excited when somebody's having a bad time, I think that's terrible. So.
I mean, even Jordan Peterson is suffering from some of that, because there's a definite the resentment that Nietzsche was talking about fits so perfectly with like the SJW types today, the war. But Nietzsche, Jordan Peterson himself has been a target of that type of, people go after him all the time now. As the tall, what did you call it? The tall what?
Tall poppy. So it's the tall poppy syndrome.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's another saying that is in Japan that's really prevalent, and it's the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. So there's even speaking to not standing out, and it's not considered a good idea to stand out from the crowd in a place like Japan. So
a virtue of conformance to the crowd, which very much relates to Peterson or Nietzsche's criticism of morality as a herd instinct. And it's very much like that idea of conforming to the basis of the crowd. And because we think about all the people within our histories, people like Rosa Parks or Mahatma Gandhi. These are people that are going against the current ethics of the time for the culture around them. And so it kind of points out how just because a large group of people has this understanding of what's right and wrong, it's capable of being changed, which seems to be a strong, or at least Nietzsche uses it as a strong indication of there being no such thing as objective morality. I don't know if that statement that there's no such thing as objective morality is the same as there's no such thing as objective value. I don't know if Nietzsche exactly would be, bringing up objective value in it, but he's very much against the idea that there is such things as evil, that things that should not exist, because of course he rejects free will.
Yeah, I watched a video this morning that piggybacks on that idea from Inspiring Philosophy that was on, it had a lot to do with moral realism and moral relativism and a lot of these same topics. And he did a really good job of creating sort of a sketch of exactly where everything fits on whether it's cognitivist or non-cognitivist, and I can't say that well, but he did a pretty good job on that. So I recommend that video. I actually tweeted it out a little while ago. So.
By the way, this is slightly off topic, Stephanie, but did you get into morality today with what's his face?
Yeah, that's why I did. I happen to really like that topic, and I don't want to be repetitive, but that's why I've been kind of quiet now because I said a lot.
No, go for it. Go for it. Because I've heard him talk on that a few times, and I like the guy a lot, but I find his take on it somewhat exasperating. But go ahead. What happened?
Well, here's a couple of big takeaways that I think that if anyone wants to talk about this, I keep hearing the same arguments back and forth, and finally I thought of a response that I thought made sense. But one of the things is they have their studies out right now. There's two studies that I have right practically next to me, but one's by Shalom Schwartz, and it basically said that for some strange reason, Shalom found it shocking after collecting data from thousands and thousands of people, 40,000 people over a bunch of different countries in the world, that everyone felt like that certain values were a certain way. People might have valued achievement or hedonism or stimulation, but he was shocked when he found that overall, everyone in every country, when he pulled out these different samples and did t-tests and that kind of thing, he found that people overall had the highest values of benevolence and universalism. And he thought that was completely shocking because he knew that the is values weren't corresponding with the ought. So like the David Hume is ought dichotomy. So he realized that was very strange, that how come the whole world realizes what we ought to do is to be benevolent and to be universalist, to basically try to help other people and to be good to people and to strive for the betterment of the world. He thought that was very strange. And other studies of all different religions, like one by Kinnear and a couple of other co-authors, identified those same sort of values, like the golden rule is prevalent throughout the world. And atheists are always the first to say, well, Christianity didn't invent the golden rule. It's been around for years before. And I said, well, that's the point.
That's exactly the point. Yeah, and that undercuts the whole, that underscores the whole idea that it's universal instead of...
That's the point, yeah. But the other point is that they say to me a lot when I make these arguments is, and what was said today as far as Schuyler said, well, you're pulling articles from today and what's going on in today. And I said, well, Schuyler, just because Shalom Schwartz didn't collect data 1,000 years ago doesn't mean that it wasn't going on 1,000 years ago. But even if it were not going on 1,000 years ago, think about 7 billion people with a good sample of people representing 7 billion people in the world are all sort of understanding that we ought to do this thing. I said, God's done a pretty good job. If all of these cultures from all different socioeconomic levels, all different education, all different religions, all happen to know that benevolence and universalism are what we ought to strive for. And then he didn't like that, so he started kind of backpedaling a little bit.
Schuyler's a good guy, but speaking of morality, in your debate with a carrier who has a PhD, in case you didn't know, is I just found it hilariously ironic that a polyamorous adulterer was making a case for objective morality without God.
He's entertaining. It's kind of sad because a lot of the really famous ones now it's coming out that they're doing these sort of strange things. Like Richard Carrier was trying to solicit women to I shouldn't go into it. This is gossip now, so I better stop. But there's that.
What was he doing?
He sexually harassed 3 women, and he responded the same way he responds to his critics, that they're all incompetent, stupid liars. Bayesian probability tells me that.
Wait, is he in trouble right now publicly for sexual harassment, or no?
Yeah.
Or is this just rumor?
But his uncultured followers don't want to see that.
No, he apparently was running an ad on the internet that said that he needed a place to stay when he was going to some of these atheist conferences. And, he would like to pair up with another woman who had the same sort of sexual views as he had, which were pretty liberal.
I want to pair up with somebody I can hook up with. Is that what he said? I want to hook up with somebody. So invite me into your house so I can have sex.
You should see
something like that.
His blog is a gold mine of unintentional comedy. That one where he was begging for a date with a former prostitute was one of the funniest things I've read.
So well then there's another one too. Is the guy Lawrence Krauss, because he just got in trouble and it was all over the.
Yeah, but he got in trouble.
Thank God his 15 minutes are up.
He got in trouble because he was. harassing women at his school, Arizona State. So he just got in trouble for that. He's now kind of forced into voluntary retirement.
I feel kind of apprehensive of going down the quick route of accepting the gossip, just because I know a lot of it is out of the kind of I don't know. There's a lot of people that are willing to use this type of gossip in order to further their political agenda. And so it's very hard out there to
nobody draw conclusions. We agree. Mm-hmm. I just thought it was funny that what's the thing that he said, invite me over to your house. Somebody's put me up for the night who has the same liberal views that I have. In other words, I want to have sex if you want to have sex with me. Okay, let me ask a really important question though. On this subject, one of these people, does anybody know who Christina Rad is? She was like an atheist. She had a popular YouTube channel for a while. I used to love her. I won't go so far as to say she's really hot, but she's really pretty hot. I mean, she's like really exotic and like Eastern European with this blonde, like curly, frizzy hair. And she had an atheist channel. And I think her and Lawrence Krauss, I think she was the one making the accusations. But if nobody knows who she is, she did a video about it a little while ago. She stopped posting things.
Then there's also Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's in heat as of late.
I read Neil's response to that. I'm not totally sure I'm sold on his case. I mean, I think he actually might be. I think sometimes men might be found guilty before they're actually truly guilty. In his case, something about that case seems a little off.
Accusations like that can ruin your life.
Yeah,
they do nowadays. They totally do. I haven't seen the Neil deGrasse. I just saw that there was accusations, but I haven't actually looked into them yet. So I don't know.
I looked into the Richard Carrier ones, and I looked into the Lawrence Krauss, and I think those might have some merit. But Neil deGrasse, I would be willing to give him the benefit of the doubt because his story just didn't seem like it seemed a little sketchy as far as the woman is concerned.
Mm-hmm. Going back though to what you were bringing up, Stephanie, how all these different cultures all have these same conceptions of like what we ought to do, like with universalism and benevolence. It seems like that very much kind of fits into the kind of conceptions of the church fathers in the past of what was called, I think, natural law. I think Thomas Aquinas had this. I think several Jewish philosophers also had this, like with the like Ben Shapiro brings this up with the Noetic laws. There's like 7 laws that everyone in the world, whether Jew or Gentile, has these like inbuilt knowledge of what we should be doing, like how we're supposed to be acting.
Shapiro brought that up in the thing you were just talking about. Where did Shapiro bring that up?
I'm not sure when during it, but I think he brought it up. But it's something else that, like, it's with part of the Jewish religion that there's the 7 Noetic laws, which were prior to Moses, that the whole world has these kind of inbuilt natural laws for how to act, and I think that this idea kind of fits well with, it's not a perfect comparison, but with Jonathan Haidt's work in our moral intuitions. It seems kind of different because, like, in the past, it might have been conceptualized more as, like, people have these ideas of rules, like how to act, and you can kind of build up a set of logical, like, conclusions based upon specific rules. But with Jonathan Haidt's work, it seems to be more fitting within these kind of ideas of values. So, like, there's I don't know, more free flowing. So, like, it's something that can like build onto itself. Yeah, go ahead.
The 3 authors that I'm talking about, they're called Kinnear, Kearns, and Doutharibes. Now, this is another study. It's called a short list of universal moral values, and the short list has 4 different sections. I've got the deal right here, but I'm just going to mention the 4 overviews. One is a commitment to something greater than oneself, and again, they looked at all religions, including atheism, humanism, and the United Nations. So, religions plus, I should say, those three. And self-respect, but with humility, self-discipline, and acceptance of personal responsibilities, 2. 3 is respect and caring for others, which is the golden rule. And 4 is caring for others, living things in the environment. So all humans know that this is what's right, according to them, according to religious and moral codes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes complete sense. That's like stuff that I've been saying in my videos, that there's such a thing as universal moral intuitions. That's exactly what you just said, universal moral intuitions. We all sort of know that those things are right, no matter what culture you come from, unless you were raised as a psychopath, or you are a psychopath.
Agreed.
if you don't know that those are right, there's something really unhealthy. That's the part where Sam Harris is kind of right, is that if you don't recognize that those things are correct, there's something wrong with you. It's not, I just not feeling that. There's something unhealthy about you. You're probably a psychopath, or you're probably really like a disturbed person. So, go ahead.
I've been reading No Ordinary Men by Christopher Browning, and reading the acts that the Nazis did against the Jews and the Polish. I don't know. It brought to light. Sorry, give me 1 second.
What happened?
Sorry, I'm in a public place, so I better be a little bit quieter.
What? Where are you?
Look! No, I just want to. While you're there, I'm going to say who's in the chat right now, because I just see a few people I want to mention, so you guys know, because I know some of you aren't watching the chat. So I'm going back a little bit. I see Note in the Network. Okay, so if you know them, Quad 9363, Squircifer, and Paulogia. He just jumped on, and he's got a question. I asked FJ before if there's a single thing on that list that does not provide a biological advantage for a social species. If not, then biology is sufficient. Now, I disagree, but you guys can take that one, and I can piggyback on you if you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Biology. Go ahead.
Well, there's something very different about morality in regards to evolution, whereas primarily, like, we as organisms are adaptive to our environment. But with morality, there's this change where it's about how we are to change our environment. So there's something within us that is driving us to change our surroundings. That is, I don't know, it's very different from the idea of just behaving in order to cohere with the environment around you. It's about behaving in order to change the environment around you to better fit your sense of the ideal.
Okay. Did I get lost?
Sorry.
No.
I didn't know if I got dropped off. I didn't, because all of a sudden it was quiet.
Oh, yeah.
No, it was...
Mm-hmm. I don't have any further than that, I guess.
What was it? Is that Paulogia, Paul?
Paulogia, yeah. So he says that's a biological advantage. Let me just say something, and maybe we should give Paulogia a link, but another...
Yeah, absolutely.
Another...
Paul, you're welcome to come on.
If he wants to, see if he wants to.
He's decent.
But another thing, as far as biological advantage, I'm just wondering what the biological advantage is of helping the weak over helping the strong, and why biology would say that we should, the selfish should thrive, and we should thrive when we're the strongest, and why help the weak in society? Why not let them die off? Because they're only holding us back and not helping ourselves to thrive physically or anything like that. So.
Well, I think the idea that it's rooted in biology actually kind of underscores it's why I like that Sam Harris tries to root this stuff in science, because it underscores the universalism of it. I don't see it as like these are apologetics and these are prove God, but the fact that these universal moral intuitions exist, they start to indicate, if we start to really think about it, they indicate that there's probably a divine being, but they're not. I don't see them as apologetics. I just see them as the truth. And science can start establishing the truth. And you're going to root some of the truth in biological advantage, of course.
Even with just the argument of biological advantage, if that were the case, that morality is just what is supposed to be most advantageous to our biology, that means that all the instances of people that have suffered for their adaptations to the culture of the environment around them, so like the people around them, like I mentioned earlier with Rosa Parks, or even just within World War II, that means that all of the people that it's more biologically advantageous to follow suit with the rest of the people around you, the Nazis, the SS, and to cohere with the moral structure around you rather than to rise up against it. Or
yeah, that's a fair statement. I want to see Scorsifer saying, what exactly is tuition other than situational awareness?
I don't understand the question. What is intuition other than situational awareness?
Acute situational awareness. Mm-hmm. I kind of think they're the same, but I could be.
Intuition would be having a conception of how things should rather be, like a preference towards a certain state, whereas having awareness of your environment gives you no understanding of like how to act within that environment or how to change that environment.
Right. Well, with morals, for example, if we're talking about the moral intuition, one of the things that's really useful, there's some of this that's culturally induced. Like they did studies where what was the one with the if you're going to have sex with the chicken? I think it is. or maybe, and people have like.
Wait, Craig. Let's be clear. It was a chicken carcass.
Yeah. Was it really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. Never mind. That changes the whole thing. Who wouldn't want to do that? So.
This is the problem with society.
You get skeeved out because you have a sense of moral revulsion. Some of that has been put in you by your culture. Like if we were in, Pakistan and we saw a woman wearing burqas, we might get morally revulsed. Whereas if we were raised in the culture, we wouldn't. But some of it seems to be innate, where there's the culture.
Some of the most beautiful women in the world, hiding them is crime. Should be a crime.
Yeah, well, yeah.
That's why they hide them. They don't want their friends stealing them.
Yeah, you just fight. No one's stealing my wife.
No one will know how pretty my wife is.
No one's hiding my wife. Nobody's going near. Right, John?
Mm-hmm. Should we get back to Nietzsche? I don't know.
It doesn't matter. These are supposed to be. These are supposed to be. If you got something to say on Nietzsche, go for it. Or white or.
No.
But these are supposed to be free-flowing conversations. It's not supposed to be structured necessarily. There'll be a time where we have like a structured give and take on a certain subject, but that time is not today. So, whatever you want to talk about.
Would anyone?
But you can.
Yeah.
You can go back to Nietzsche if you want.
Sorry. No. I just wasn't sure how you wanted the structure of it to go. Sorry.
Well, I like that. I think it was nice that we brought in the objective morality, because I do think that that's something that I think that we have an angle with as far as being a theist and having a transcendent divine lawgiver who is responsible
absolutely
for our objective morality. The fact that we have these desires to do what's best to help people. I mean, it's kind of strange when you think about it, why we have these innate desires to and knowledge that we ought to help everyone. And we feel guilty when we don't.
It was evolution of the gap.
You don't feel guilty when you walk by somebody who needs help and you don't help them.
Evolution did it. Evolution of the gaps.
Evolution of the gaps.
Oh, wow. That's actually a good one. Evolution of the gaps. Yeah, it's evolution. It's all evolution. Evolution did it.
Well, I've heard science of the gaps a lot, because a lot of times people fill all the blanks in with science. Well, science doesn't know that yet. Science can't explain exactly what happened prior to the Big Bang, and because there was no space, time, and matter as we know it. And so science will figure it out.
Yeah, that's a face.
Science will figure out how we started here. We're suspecting panspermia, or science is going to figure out before the Big Bang, it must be a multiverse. I mean, this stuff, and then the other one is, did you see my study with aliens?
Actually, the multiverse is not so far-fetched. Heaven and hell would be among those infinite universes.
Well, assuming that there's not a dimension within our universe that heaven and hell couldn't exist within. But yeah, you're right. It could be outside the universe too.
I did not see your alien study. What?
So here's what was interesting. So I do this little Twitter thing, and I want to say over 1,000 people responded, and I wanted to see the distinction between.
They always do.
So I wanted to see what people felt about the possibility of aliens and the likelihood that aliens were in existence. And 60% of atheists figured that aliens were a possibility, and 60% of theists said no way. And so I thought that was really interesting because so they were more open to aliens, space aliens being a possibility if you don't believe in God, but you're less open to the idea if you believe in God. You see where that's going?
But if you dismiss
because we're more rational. We're more rational.
Power, you have to dismiss. If you deny there's a higher power, you have to dismiss life on other planets. Else, you're being selective with your quote unquote skepticism.
Yeah, because in both cases, people would say, well, you don't see God and you don't see space aliens. So which one are you more open to?
Well, there's the famous.
They'll argue that since there's life here, that's evidence of life elsewhere. I'm like, no, that's a non sequitur.
We don't have, just because there's life here doesn't mean there's evidence of life elsewhere. But you know what Neil deGrasse Tyson thinks? I don't know if you guys have seen his latest. So he held it was sort of a speech or a workshop, and he got up there and he said that he thinks there's a possibility that the whole universe is a simulation, and it's being run by aliens who are far more advanced than we are, and that they are sort of laughing at how stupid we are down here on the Earth. And there's,
2001: A Space Odyssey.
He said, I'm serious. This was a serious event, and Cy Gart sent it to me. So.
And he really said that for real? Like
I promise you, I got to find. I'll find the link. I've tweeted it.
That's the Neil deGrasse Tyson who was harassing all these women, right? Same guy.
Yeah. Well, supposedly, I'm not sure. I'm completely.
Oh, you're not buying it? You think he's innocent?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about him.
He did it. He has a chance. God, he so did it. He did it. Give me a break.
As far as the universe simulation, what's your thought on that theory?
I hate theories like that.
It was just further validated by higher power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, any computer that would be able to run a simulation that is that could power the entire universe that we exist within would require a computer much larger than the universe that we actually exist within. Unless, of course, it was like some sort of quantum computer, but then that kind of breaks realism where things exist outside of people interacting with them. So, like, the only things that would be able to exist would be... Say that? Yeah, it's like there's a Donald Hoffman who kind of makes the case for... I don't know what his exact case is, but I think it's similar to the simulation hypothesis. And that the only interaction, the only reality is that which is within the conscious mind, that which is experienced. So, but I don't know. It's interesting because that's very similar to the case that inspiring philosophy makes with his quantum idealism, as he calls it, that using the same calculations of people like Donald Hoffman and Neil deGrasse Tyson and the rest of the simulationists in order to prove that I guess the substrate is God. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, does it remind you?
It's weird.
The theory reminds me. Have any of you read the book or seen the movie Under the Dome by Stephen King?
No.
Sorry.
Oh, it's fascinating. He started writing the book in early 1970s, and it's like a 2,000-page book. So I think it is maybe either 1,000 or 2,000. But I sat down and I read the book. I don't know, about 10 years ago or 5 years ago. And he has this. It was a funny little story of people who lived in this little town, and this big gigantic dome just came over and covered the town. So they were all stuck in there, and it was a glass dome, and they couldn't get out. And but it wasn't quite glass. It was like some material that they just couldn't overcome it. And so they were stuck under this big dome, and I'm not going to give the spoiler of exactly what happened, but it's extremely similar to Neil deGrasse Tyson's theory. And I also think that's funny. So, I mean, there were other people outside who were not people in the United States or in the world who were controlling this dome. It wasn't anyone within the Earth. So it was a really fascinating little story.
Indian, did you say something?
So, I like a Truman Show.
What's that?
Like Truman Show. You seen that?
No, I did see that.
The Truman Show's pretty good, actually. It's like a TV show. They're filming his whole life as a TV show, and he doesn't know that it's a TV show until somewhere in the middle of the movie. He thinks he's just living a normal life, and this is his friends and this is his family, but his whole life is a TV show. It's kind of a cool meta concept. There was another one that was the same idea. It came out at the same time. Well, who's the actor in that? That was what's his face?
Jim Carrey.
Jim Carrey, yeah. Mm-hmm. Did you see it, John? Did you like it?
Yeah, it's a good one. It's especially pertinent for Jim Carrey as an actor because, like, the year before that, he was on top of the world with like 3 major blockbusters and all in 1 year. And so it very much was similar to his real life, and yeah, how he felt like his life was going at that time.
I mean, the best movie like that with similar theme is The Matrix. That gets you like
that and 13th Floor.
13th Floor I've never seen. I don't even know what that is. What is that?
It's came out the same year The Matrix did.
Oh, really? Don't know it. But yeah, The Matrix is actually really, really awesome in terms of its conceptualization of, an imaginary world that we're all partaking in, or a computer-run simulation.
Yeah, that's good. You guys, I'm going to have to run. I just got the signal that getting a little signal on my phone that I got to go downstairs and make sure everybody's eating their meals. I made a roast beef today, but I don't know if it's been consumed. So
okay.
Yeah, okay.
One of my sons just got back, so.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thanks for joining us, Stephanie. This was great.
Thank you. It's always great talking to everybody. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, this was fun. Bye, Stephanie.
Bye.
Is Paula Gia coming? Does he want to come?
Oh, before I say that, I sent Paul the link, but he said that his kids are being very demanding. They want to have dinner right now.
So you say no. Say no. Go to bed without supper. I'm in charge here.
Yeah. All right. I'll talk to you guys later.
All right. Bye, Stephanie.
And Kyle said he would watch, but I make it unbearable for him.
Who said he would watch?
Kyle.
Oh, God. You make it unbearable. How is it?
I don't know. He hates my guts.
I caught that. I thought that there's a lot of bad blood between you and the non-sex.
We used to be friends, but then he got upset I was giving Godless Engineer shit, and he's fiercely loyal to him and KC, and eventually turned on me, and I don't know. It's just
it turned into a bad, like, it turned pretty bad. But when I see you guys like on Twitter, the fights, they seem pretty like escalated from normal, like, you're a dumb Christian, you're a dumb atheist type stuff. But I don't know how it got that intense. Did he really say, was he in the live chat and he said he won't participate or something? Oh, well.
Yeah.
I like Kyle.
He would watch, but I make it unbearable for him because I challenge his beliefs too much.
Mm-hmm. One of the.
So, John,
no, go ahead.
Did you want to get back to? Do you want to go back to Nietzsche? Were you going to?
Sure,
we can go back.
Yeah,
I just wanted it to be more free form when she brought. I love that study that she's talking about. I'm going to start talking about that a lot. But go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just actually no. That's right. I probably actually better head off soon too.
Well, we can shut it down. What time is it? It's 4:20.
I'm about to have dinner too.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, let's close her out then.
Mm-hmm.
So you have seen the Nietzsche experts at work, and you have been blown away by our knowledge of Nietzsche and how we tied into Christianity. And then we had Stephanie on. We brought up some other subjects about objective morality. Overall, I would say it was a successful endeavor, and that is the broadcast for tonight. Thank you very much. We are out.